Hey, I'm John. Thanks for joining me for this video today. In this video, I'm going to continue working on Bandai's 1/48 scale Snowspeeder from Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back. In the previous video in this series, I covered painting and detailing the cockpit, and you can see how that turned out here. And if I remember to link to it, there should be a little link popping up about right now somewhere up here. So if you've not seen that video when this one's finished up, go check that out. But I like the way the cockpit turned out, and I went ahead and just mainly for the sake of photography purposes, just dry fitted the upper and lower fuselage halves together. I didn't fully push them together because the fit is really good, but it's really tight. And I knew once I had it together, I wouldn't probably have a second opportunity to get it apart. So this video is going to cover the assembly and painting of this Snowspeeder. The paint scheme on the Snowspeeder is fairly simple. It's a very, very light gray with some stripes. However, there are a few things that I found in a previous build of this model that helped me with the painting and the weathering and kind of bringing everything together. So what I'm going to be doing is building up each of these side parts that are on here. These, I'm not sure what you call them, but they come down the side of the wings. I'm going to be building those in sub-assemblies and painting them as much as possible off of the model. And the same way with these gun parts, keeping them off of the model as long as possible. And I'll even do some initial weathering, or at least that's my plan right now. I'll do some initial weathering of the main body of the model before ever adding those on. It's just going to make things a little easier. So if you build this model, it's something to keep in mind, to look at how will all of this fit together and how will it weather. When I built it before, I put these parts on, I put these parts on, and I put these rear parts of the cannons on. And later I wished I wouldn't have done that, because while I was happy with the overall finish, it made weathering and painting around them a little difficult. So I think on this one I'm going to assemble them and keep them off of the model. But first I got to get the basic parts assembled and get all those sub-assemblies done. To make it easy to pull those parts off on either side and paint them separately, I decided to do a little bit of modification to the parts, not only to make it easy to remove them, but also to get a little better fit. First thing I did, and this even if you're going to leave them on, you need to do this. There's some ejector pin marks on the underside, so you want to clean those off. And then I just take a file and file down all of the edges so that there's a good flat surface to join. And then these faces snap into there's little tabs that snap into the face of that. I clipped those off to give me a little more of a flush fit, and then just used my file to sand that down and get a really nice flat backing on that. Once I had that done, it allowed me to glue that in and just kind of roughly glue it in place. I only put glue along the top because I wanted to push this onto the model to set the angles. So I didn't put any glue on the bottom. I didn't want it to glue to the model. I just wanted it to glue to that one piece. So I put the glue on the top and let that start setting. I clipped off these pegs on the bottom that fit into the very top of the wing, and I clipped them pretty far down because I only wanted enough there to help me align the part. I didn't really want it to have much of a grip. And once I got those glued on there and that clipped off, I could set this part in place and then move the parts around because the glue was still workable, and just make sure that everything was lined up and ready to go. And then I just set it aside so that it could dry and set in place. Now for the forward one, there's a peg that goes in that big hole there. I clipped that peg way down so that I didn't have to worry about taking it on and off the model being difficult. And on this one, I glued the top part on first and got that set in place because my plan was to use that to align the other two parts too. And just like I did on the previous parts, I clipped off the alignment tabs and made sure not to ping them off into eternity. And then I grabbed my file and just filed that area down so that it was flat and would give me a good fit. Set it in place just like I did before. Put a little glue again along the top. I didn't want any glue on the side that was going to touch the model because I did not want this setting in place. So I got that lined up best I could off the model, and then once I had it fairly reasonably lined up, I just set it onto the model, plugged it into that hole, and checked the alignment of everything, make sure that it fit well, and that all the sides were flush. And once I glued it on later, there wouldn't be any kind of gap or anything showing that would cause any problems. And then I just set it aside to dry for a couple of hours. Once that dried, I popped those back off, put the guns in place, or the mid part of the gun rather, put those in place, and just put it back on the model to check the fit. And once it's pushed in place, you really can't tell that that's going to be added after the fact. So it's going to make it much easier to do it this way by having those parts as separate units that can be painted and weathered and handled off of the model rather than trying to struggle with it on the model. Alright, I let these assemblies dry overnight just to make sure they're set, so that what I'll be able to do is once I have the model painted, I can just go in and snap those in, glue them in place, because now that I've cleaned up that join, I'll be able to, with just a little bit of glue, hold that down, and it's going to stick and there's not going to be any gaps. So it gives better access to the area underneath here and around here. When I'm weathering, I'll be able to paint and do initial weathering like this and then add these in later. Now, a couple of other things that I did that I think will help in the assembly. You remember I talked about that I was planning on using this canopy, but I wasn't sure if I was going to use the clear canopy or not. Well, I figured out, I don't know why I didn't think about this before. If I just mask off this clear part, I can pop that in here and put that on the model, if I can see what I'm doing, and build it like that. Well, trust me, it fits. Anyway, I can build it like that, and then when I get to the end, I can decide if I want the clear part in or not. Easy to pop out. You just push on the back side of it, pull it out from the back, and then rotate down. You can get it out at the front. So it'll mask everything off, and then at the end I get to decide, do I want to use both of them together or just this thing separately. But the paint will be organic to the rest of it. It won't seem like it was painted off the model, which is one of the things I wanted to avoid as this goes along. Another construction note, this part here goes at the back, of course. When I built it before, I had built it all together and primed it, painted the whole model, and then went back in and brush painted this, but it wasn't quite as sharp as I wanted, and I wasn't able to get to this quite like I had hoped without touching other stuff. So this time I thought I'd see if I could add this later, but I wanted to make sure that if I could not, that I didn't have everything permanently set in place. Now, normally when you sandwich these two together and push them tight, they're not coming apart. Bandai's fit is really good and it's really tight, and a lot of times when you've got a lot of big pegs like this, it's really permanent. Or you can get it apart, but it takes some work. So what I did was just went in and clipped all of the pegs along here, and then where these go in, instead of trying to clip those, I just put some clips in two places on either side of those big receptacles here that the pegs go in, so they don't have as much tension. Now I'll be able to glue this together, but I did all of that to make sure that once this is together, that I can then go in and just fit this in, and if I could see what I'm doing, I can fit this in. I've tested it, trust me. I can fit this in right here and just push that in. There we go. And I don't have to I don't have to try and do any crazy masking or worrying about painting that, you know, in some way. Because it does stick fairly well, even when I pull the two halves apart. This part takes a little bit of effort to get out from up here. Now I could clip these a little bit, but they're such large structures I didn't want to go and try and start clipping those and risk warping the part itself. So if you're building this, go ahead and assemble this part. Leave the grill part. There's a big grill part that goes off of this. Leave that off, of course, so that you can paint some detail, because when you look through the grill you can see some of the details there. All right, all that's left to do is add these parts on here and assemble the gun barrels, but I'll leave them separate and it'll be just about ready to prime. So let me do that and I'll show you a little more of that and then I'll go prime it. All right, I've got everything clipped off the sprues and cleaned up and ready for priming and painting. Let me go over a little bit of the method to my madness, because this kit goes together well, and if you just want to put the whole thing together and mask stuff off and do that, it'll work fine. I'm just trying to make it a little easier on myself. So after I built it before, I came away thinking, next time I'm going to do it this way. So here's what I've done. There's this little gray piece that goes on the front. It's going to be this color of gray. Now I'll paint that, but I'll leave it off because the fit is so good you won't be able to tell that it was added later. So I'll paint that separately. Same with these little panels that go on this part and then over here. I'll leave those off and paint them gray. Now my plan is for this side to be closed up, but there's some striping along here, so I'm going to actually paint this part off of the model and then just glue it in place when I'm done, so I'll have a nice neat stripe and won't have to be masking off, you know, huge sections of that. It'll make it much easier. On this side, I want this spoileron, I guess you'd call it, to be popped up, but I want this area in here to be painted a darker color and then detailed. So my plan is, when I start the priming and painting, I'm going to paint this a dark, probably German gray, do whatever dry brushing and basic finishing I want to it. And then I'm just going to use this part here that represents it being closed, and I'm just going to pop it in place. When I get further along in the build, I can pop that back out and stick this in place so it will be up. So it'll mask off this area and keep it nice and neat, but allow me to still do everything I want to do and not have to have much muss or fuss about it. These little spoilerons that go on the lower part, I have it so that this one is in the closed position and this one is in the deployed position. My thinking is that this one would be popped down while this one was popped up, which would induce, if we're talking real world physics, which would induce a roll. So I thought that might look pretty cool. There's this area here that this display stand plugs into, and they've got some detail in there, so it's not void of detail, but there is this little notch that this piece goes into if you want to cover that up. Now, I've considered drilling a hole in this, putting that on there and letting the display base go through there, but I decided not to do that because I thought about, because I typically sell my models, if somebody who gets it doesn't want that hole at all and they would rather just have this piece on there and covered up, I'm just going to leave it as is, finish this piece separately, and whoever buys it, I'll send it to them with this piece. So if they want to take it off the display base and pop that on there, they'll have the option to do that. And then finally, they give you this little section of tow cable, and it's supposed to stick into here and I guess look like it's just in the early stages of firing out, but in my mind that looks kind of goofy. So I'm going to check some reference photos because I can't remember if the harpoon stuck out of the end of the gun barrel and then there was the cable that deployed to it, or if it just fired out from somewhere over here separately from the gun. I can't remember. If it's separate from the gun, then I'm just going to clip this off and stick this protruding out of this little back part. If it goes from here to the gun, then what I'm probably going to do is clip these off, the ends off, put them in their respective places in the gun and right here, and then run a piece of wire between the two so it looks like that. But it's been so long since I paid attention to a detail like that, I can't remember. So I'll check that out and decide what to do then. But that's kind of the method to my madness for getting everything painted up. And so what I'm going to do now is get this snapped and glued together, get the pilot stuck in, the canopy on, mount everything up on sticks, and go do the priming and the base painting. For the spoiler on area, I wanted to dry brush it with this Vallejo Sky Gray. I'd already primed it in black, and I grabbed my big fluffy brush, and it's just a makeup brush, and I cleaned off most of the paint. You really have to clean it off there, and you can see my priming fingers there, and I just dry brushed that on there really heavily. I did this for a couple of reasons. One, I wanted to bring out the details so that it would show. It's essentially doing some edge highlighting. But the second reason was I also just wanted to be able to see what the heck I was doing. There's some very tiny detail in there, so I wanted to kind of give me a clue of where it was. For the detail painting, I grabbed my favorite Wargamer character brush, and I started by undercoating most of the areas with the Sky Gray. I just add a little thinner to it and just begin brush painting all of the little bumps and dials and buttons and wires and protrusions, just so that they could either stay that color or a later color would be able to have a little more opacity or a little more shine as I painted it on. For the wiring, I wanted to use this Balthazar Gold, which is a really great bronze color. I like this better than silver because in very small areas it just shows up more, and I just think it looks kind of cool. So I just painted in a few wires, and you can see that shows up. If somebody does a close inspection, they'll see that, and hopefully that looks pretty cool. Next, I wanted to add a spot of color, so I used this blue-green. It's just, I kind of picked it at random because I wanted to find something that just stood out. So I picked this little box over in the corner of the area, and I just painted that in with this blue-green, and it's literally just a splash of color to draw people's eye there. There's no canon reason for it to be there. It's just an attention grabber when somebody's looking at that area. Then I wanted to paint a few things red, so this contrast paint from Citadel had arrived in the mail just the day before, and I thought, why not use that? So I'm not really using it as a contrast paint, I'm just simply using it as paint. But it works fine, it goes on well, and just lets the undercolor shine through, which I'll be taking advantage of in different ways down the road with other models. But I just wanted something in there to, you know, there's always something red on a military aircraft, so there's some red stuff. That's essentially the point of that exercise. And then finally, I wanted to just deepen the shadows a little bit, so I grabbed my Citadel Nuln Oil, and I applied this fairly heavily. Now, what you're seeing here is actually the second application. When I did it the first time, it was a little more dramatic looking, but I forgot to film that. So, kind of like General MacArthur, this is a recreation of the actual event, just to show you that I put it in there fairly heavily and spread it around. And there it is. You see the shadows are deepened, the Nuln Oil is still drying, and it basically looks like a middle-aged fat guy playing with a toy painted something, which is, I guess, good enough. All right, it's time to get to the painting. One note, this is the flaperon, spoilerator, or whatever you want to call it, that's going to be open. I'm using the closed part to mask off that I painted. And what I did was I just stuck a little piece of tape on the inside, pulled it around to the outside, and when I need to pull this off, all I have to do is pull the tape back towards it like that, and it pops right up, and that way I don't have to try and dig around with a knife or anything like that to get that off of there. So my plan is to, it's been primed already. I used a mix of a few drops of Badger Stynylrez black and then some more white to make a very light gray prime. I'm actually going to go back and prime it in a slightly, or not prime it, but paint it in a slightly darker gray. And then I'm going to do some mottling and streaking with progressively lighter shades to give it just kind of a weathered look. And I'll show that as I make the progress. I'm not going to show the painting because it's fairly basic, and I've done that in other videos. So, but I will be showing it as I make progress with each coat. And there's also going to be parts that I'm going to be painting and masking, so I'll show that also. There's actually quite a bit of color on this model, and while the instructions show you where it's at, one of the easiest ways I found to check it was just to look at the decal sheet. That way you can make sure that you find all the colors. I started off by painting a few panels this XF66 light gray from Tamiya, which is just on a few of them, and I just roughly painted those in, and then went back and masked over those areas. Always make sure you detack your masking tape before you put it on the model. And what I do when I'm masking off an area like this is I just lightly burnish down the tape first, and then I go in with a toothpick and I just kind of outline the panel lines so that I can easily see what I'm doing. And it also burnishes it down around the edge really well so the tape doesn't pull up. And then when I cut it, I just use a new hobby blade, a number 11 blade, and I just lightly drag it along the panel line several times until I get a good clean cut, and it's easy to lift the rest of the tape away and just leave the mask behind for painting. And there it is, masked off and ready for painting. And I did that on all the panels on the model. Then I gave it an overcoat of Sky Gray XF19, also from Tamiya, which is just a little lighter than the XF66, and it gave it a unified surface. The next step was to remove the masking tape so that I could do various distressing and streaking effects with my airbrush over both of these colors. Now, it was going to make this darker gray somewhat disappear. It will be visible, but it's much more muted, and you can see here after mottling and streaking and those effects how it makes the surface of the model look just more distressed and a little more used. The markings that come with the kit are gray, which means that's Luke's Snowspeeder, but I want to do the one of his squadron mates and do the red color. I just think it looks a little cooler. So I'm going to essentially, everywhere that there's this darker gray, I'm just going to go in with some red. Now, some of it is just separate panels, like right here and here on the front. So I'll just paint those separately, and they'll go in later. I will need to do some masking on these spoilerons that go here and cover up this mechanical area. And then on the underside, there's also going to be some red striping here and over here. So let me get that masked off and I'll get that painted. There's an old adage about 20 minutes of masking for 2 minutes of spraying. That's pretty much true. I've got this all masked up, so let me go spray some red paint. Alright, I got all the red painted on here, and now it's just time to do the unmasking. I undercoated the red areas with whole red and then went over it with Tamiya XF7 flat red. I wanted a really deep, rich, desaturated red, so that's why I gave it the undercoating of whole red, and just to give it I think it gives it a pretty cool look. You can see this part here too, but it's a little darker than Canon, but I wanted that. I didn't want it to be quite so cartoonish looking. I wanted it to be a little more military looking. But let me get this unmasked and we'll go from there. And there it is. That'll work. Now I just need to stick a few other parts on. Alright, and with all that removed and a few parts put on, it's starting to look like a snowspeeder, ain't it? I think it is. I like that. I like the way that desaturated red turned out. When I do chipping over that in the next video, that's going to really show a lot of contrast. So yeah, that's pretty cool. I like that. Alright, all I got to do now for this video is get the decals on. I get a new number 11 blade in my knife each time I cut decals, just so I get a good sharp clean cut and don't tear the decal paper. Bandai decals are pretty good. They're not cartograph quality, but they're certainly a very good quality. They remind me a lot of Tamiya decals if you've ever built a Tamiya model. Now, one of the things I like to do when I'm working with decals is I always dip them in warm water. And if you're wondering how warm, right there, it's coffee warm. That's a coffee warmer underneath my branded mug there. And it just keeps it the heat that it would be if you were drinking coffee. And it really makes the decals come off the sheet faster. They're easier to work with, and I think they adhere better and adhere to the contours a little better when they're warm like that. But I just live dangerously and put it in place with the tip of my knife blade. You could use a brush or a toothpick or any other thing like that, but this is just what I've done for years, so I stick with it. And then I get a cotton bud and just kind of squeegee out all the bubbles from underneath and the excess water. And then my favorite setting solution is Solvaset. I've used this stuff for years, and I just give it a pretty good coat. I'm not dainty with it. I don't flood it, but I give it a good coat so that it'll suck everything down. And then once you've put the Solvaset on your decals, don't touch that decal again. You can continue working, but do not touch it. Let the stuff work. Now, before going any further with the Snowspeeder, I must apologize. Some of those previous segments had really, really bad audio. I'm thinking what happened was I forgot to plug the mic into my camera. I'm actually using my phone for my camera. And I don't think I just fully seated it into the plug, and it sounds like I'm talking from the bottom of a well. But I didn't discover that until I was editing that this morning. I shot all that footage yesterday. So I profusely apologize, but obviously I can't go back and just reshoot that. And I tried narrating over it, but it was just a little weird to try and narrate over it while the whole time I'm gesturing and doing all of this other stuff. So anyway, I apologize for that goof. All right, with the decals added on, I'm going to call this guy ready to be completed for this video. Still a lot of weathering to do, but I'm happy with the way it's turning out. And there's just a few decals that I put on, a few stencil kind of things along here, and some little notational arrows and a little warning thing here. Just a few of them. On the back, I went ahead and just used the decals back here instead of trying to paint that in. And also for these little markings here, I've tried painting that in, and it's really hard to do sharp, even if you're doing a wash through there. So I just used the decals, and the Solvaset made it pull down in there, so it worked out pretty good. Got the stripes under the bottom. I can't remember if I've shown that one so far, but I'm really happy with how this is looking out, and I like that red. So I'm very pleased with how it's coming along. Well, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope this has been helpful and informative. If you're building a snowspeeder, or if you're just contemplating building one, this is a really, really fabulous kit. I can't say enough about how good this kit is, and it's one that I've told people frequently, even if you're not a fan of sci-fi or Star Wars or anything like that, build this model. It's great, if only for the experience of it. It's just a super fun model, and I highly recommend it to anybody. But thank you for watching, and especially if you're still here at the end of the video, I do appreciate that. I'm very grateful for those who watch the full video. And if you would be so kind, give me the little thumbs up, click that. That would really help me out a lot too. And of course, if you have not subscribed, there is a subscribe button down over here somewhere. So please take advantage of that. And there's also social links in the description below, all the social media that I'm on. And there's also a link to Patreon. If you have not considered supporting me on Patreon, I would be most grateful if you would just click on that link and see what I have to offer. And if you are able and willing, I would most appreciate it if you would jump in and support me as a patron. And if you're already a patron, thank you so much. I can't tell you how much it means to me that each month that you supporters just stick in there. You hang with me. You make all of this possible, because while I would continue to build models without Patreon, I would have to scale back greatly what I do, because we simply couldn't afford for me to get kits and paints and tools and equipment to do what I do, to host the website, to try and upgrade the equipment and all of those things. So my family and I are most grateful for your support. So thank you very much for your support, all of you folks who are on Patreon already. And as I always like to do, I'll leave you with one final thought. In this hobby, if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Happy day to you, friends. Bye-bye.